Starting again, welcome to episode 3 of the Virtual Excellence Show. I am Ross Dawson, and I'm a futurist, keynote speaker and strategy facilitator, and host of the Virtual Excellence Show. So we've had 3 episodes. This is the 3rd episode. The first 2 episodes were Howard Rheingold, the amazing virtual pioneer. And the 2nd episode was John Hagel, one of the biggest thinkers, best thinkers around the structure of connected economies today. So on this episode, we have Charles Clapshaw, an artist, to talk about the futures of art. So before we get to that, just I suppose the theme, this is all about. So this is about community and collaboration and conversation and exploration. So today, as we speak to Charles, please join the conversation on Twitter at #VXShow. So that's why we'll try to do conversation this time. We'll have to do some other experiments after that. We also have some bigger conversations on Facebook, sort of broader, more extended ones. And everything is going to be consolidated at our website, thevx.show, so always go there. And this is a YouTube show. We're starting off and we're looking to get started, build it up. So please, if you haven't already, subscribe to us on YouTube, and we'll get this all going. So essentially, we're going to have a weekly live stream which enables people to participate and converse, and then we'll just release some other content through the week, tutorials, lessons learned, and really trying to build this community, people who are interested and engaged and wanting to participate in the future of virtual excellence and what that can be. So today's guest is very different from the last 2. The last 2 were 8 time zones away. My current guest is not only a neighbor, 5 minutes walk away in Bondi Beach. And Charles Clapshaw is an artist and an innovator, a technologist, doing all sorts of interesting things. So Charles was an advertising man back in the day. He ran a number of very interesting agencies, Tequila, and he was then the global president of TBWA Digital Arts Network, and then went on to put all that behind, and I worked with him in Rhythm. He's also got some current collaborations. So Charles is going to join us, and we'll have a conversation around the futures of art and virtual art. So welcome, Charles.
Thank you. So I guess one of the first things that I wanted to talk about with virtual excellence, though, is something that I've understood through the last couple of months, which is there aren't that many people not gaming on virtual reality. And if we want to look at what else we can do, it would be great if there were some other people out there.
Yeah, it is interesting that we've got virtual reality. We've talked about the promise of it for a long time. You and I have been playing in that space in various ways. You'll obviously a lot more, but it still hasn't had the uptake. I mean, I wrote just earlier this year that I expect that this decade will be when VR and AR really takes off, and I think I suppose it becomes, as time passes, becomes an increasingly safe prediction. But it has taken a long time, and it's interesting that we haven't seen VR really take off, even when we're all socially isolated.
Yeah, I think that one's in particular just kind of like really just availability of handsets and who has one, because I think all of us go through cycles of having one, getting into it, then I think it still is a long game, but I think that there are probably businesses and I'll stick to art because that's kind of like all I really think about nowadays. But for what the opportunities of it could be, and I guess there's a now time for some art. I think, for example, augmented reality. I think that actually is kind of live, like it's ready, it's baked. It's in some ways a lot of it is as far as you can go now. and now it's a matter of just kind of like looking at what you can create within the technology spaces that you already have.
Yeah, well, I mean, ARKit and ARCore have obviously just really made AR available on, well, certainly for now, just the smartphone devices. And it's, the potential of what it can do, though, is still, we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah, but I kind of feel like to be able to get to the really amazing things that we could do, we have to try and be able to make some success with like really simple things. Like I guess watching what's happening at the moment really reminds me of watching like the internet when I was what was that name? A webmaster. And like thinking about like the complexity that gets added, but once you are like kind of really deep into it, you don't really notice that complexity anymore.
Yeah.
Which I think is an interesting thing. But also it's about like I play a lot as well, and when I say play, I guess it's a little bit of structured play, but at the same time it helps you learn. And for me, one of the most important things about the topic of virtual excellence would really be making content, and also then testing it with people to see that if it is any good or not. And excuse me that I drink coffee too, because it's morning here in my studio and I need it. But Ross, could we put on perhaps Pompidou just to show an example? So what I wanted to do is actually just perhaps give a bit of...
You have to give me a number, Charles.
Right. Yeah, sorry. Okay, could we please play... let's start from the top. So if you roll number 1... number 2, actually, sorry. Is it too late? Oh, number 1's good. Okay, number 2. Thank you, sir. So this is something I put together actually 2 years ago. So this is kind of like what I was seeing in the AR industry, and I put it together just to kind of reference and just show people what, in this case, image recognition AR is. And there's some great Australian guys called iJack, and also in Austria, this is another company called RTV. But what they've nailed it in terms of working in galleries and providing a really amazing infrastructure for artists so that we can start augmenting our artworks and worry less about the technology and start playing around with watching what works or maybe looking to extend your artwork. This is something that was done in Japan, where they actually did it the other way around. So rather than augmenting reality working with your vision, it actually translates to speech. So that means that blind people can use their different fingernails as markers. And from that, then they can do all that wanting. The other one I kind of wanted to also show, and remember, like, this is a kind of an old reel, so the newsroom I showed was an older newsroom, but that was also, kind of like what you've got behind you with your infographics. In many ways, you could all argue that is augmented reality, because it's doing a thing called body occlusion to find your body and determine where it is in the background. Yep. So kind of like it's weird, because I started off saying that no one uses it, but then we've just gone through and we're using it at the moment, even though we're on Zoom.
Yes, yeah. Well, I mean, that's it. So I suppose there's many interfaces between the virtual and the augmented, and one of them is that in the virtual world we can augment ourselves and do augment ourselves, I suppose, as I am in this, this set. And, I think it's one of the things which I've always said is with AI, of course, then when we do live video calls, we're just going to be able to choose what we look like and whether our hair is combed or we're made up, or what we wear and so on. So we are augmenting ourselves in those virtual worlds.
Yeah, well, because I'm always Lenny from the Simpsons when I'm in virtual reality. And the interesting thing is, like, one of the people that I work with who does do video chat, a friend in London, when we meet in real life now, he doesn't think of me as the real life character, because he's used to being in a room and talking to Lenny all the time. Right. But what's fascinating is we have realized that even though, like, at the moment, like, there's not a lot to our avatar in terms of sophistication, apart from the fact that our hands move in sync with when our hands are moving, and our mouths move in sync with our mouths, and spatially, generally, we're near to where we might be. So the setup's not great, but we do find, we're like, wow, it's amazing that those conversations are a lot, we remember them more and we communicate more effectively than if we try and do it on video chat. So yeah, so there's definitely something even in that, just that whole presence or assumption of presence thing.
So one of the things you've been working on is virtual galleries and museums, and of course around the world galleries and museums have been closed. So what are good ways of going about being able to give people access to these places virtually?
Well, if we can roll number 3, please, Ross. This is from last year, so this is before everything changed. So this was kind of like, this is at in Paris at the Centre Pompidou. The exhibition was called Cosmopolis 2, and I just worked with 2 artists in terms of augmenting their works. This is Tricky Walsh's work, and then later on it will show you another New Zealand artist called Lisa Rehana. So yeah, so initially, like we never really ever like, and when I say we, like, you know, obviously I'm an artist that works with galleries, so we've got a common problem, which is how can we get people to come along? And initially we were worried about things like placemaking, and we were worried about virtual tours, and you know, like how can we integrate everything together? So this kind of came from a whole different place, and definitely, I think that it has accelerated like plans for virtual installations and virtual galleries.
Yep.
Yeah, like as Ross alluded to, we do have a virtual gallery kind of like work in progress at the moment, which will exist, and it does already exist in augmented reality, and we're just working through I think the virtual and the augmented can all fit together actually. Like, I guess it doesn't have to be one or the other as well. Which is interesting. But going back to you know, what the opportunities are in galleries and what could be done, the challenge is time as well. Like everything, like you have to have enough time to think about it, and what you can do with existing technologies. But what I also did just for some kind of like demos is, if it's interesting, I thought I'd just kind of show my workflow on how I get there.
Sure.
And you know, it was maybe some shiny objects. Potentially less intellectually stimulating, but maybe some shiny colors in the morning might be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for me, like a lot of what I you know, like I am looking at 2 things for what I do with my art. Like one would be, I guess, existentialism and minimal geometry would be. And if you look behind me, that's kind of like the stuff I do, like circles and squares. But I'm actually using circles and squares to try and play with emotion or shape. And that kind of carries through quite nicely into augmented or computer reality, where it allows me just to use more things and more senses. So if we run number 4.1, that will be just an example of some early conceptual artwork. All of this is all triggered to music as well, and it's triggered to movement and sound, and it's like, you know, just kind of like nice shapes. If we go to can we run 4.2 and 4.3 after this, just so that you can just kind of see. So this is kind of where you start, and often in terms of explorations, these are just kind of simple algorithms that are reacting to things. And I guess what I'm looking for, I'm different than other people who play in code and technical things, because I'm looking for mistakes and errors and interesting things to happen. The reason I've shown these 3 is because I'm showing like kind of like the exploration. So all those 3 algorithms and kind of interactions actually then got distilled down to this one here, which is like, you know, super simple. You're like, oh, how did you get there? And it's like you have to take a lot out to get there. And my thinking in digital or virtual is the same as real world. As an artistic process.
So part of the work, which I think is really interesting, is around body mapping, and I think that's one of the reasons why that's really interesting, is that it starts to provide a foundation for taking a person and putting them anywhere.
Yeah.
So,
Oh no. Well, that's my goal. I would like to put Ross Dawson on your dining room table in augmented reality.
sounds
And
good.
and we've worked out how to do it. Like, where's a demo for that one? I think it's number 5. Yeah, if you could play number 5, then it will show. Yes, here we go. Now, interestingly, this is actually the same project, but what I was doing in the first ones is I was trying to find some beautiful shapes and things. Now, what I'm doing is this is using AI Cat. If you want to use it on Android too.
Yep.
Basically, it's the phone recognizing your body, and then it recognizes all the joints in your body, and then it tracks all those joints. And I agree with you, Ross. I feel like this is a really interesting direction. And currently, I'm actually working with a ballet dancer in Paris about how can we track the movements, and then can we actually make people feel things from having like a virtual object moving around you? That's the space that we play, and I think this tracking stuff is really fascinating. Even just also testing, like another example for, if you look at that robot that was tracking the body, it's a pretty average robot, but that's cool because robots are easy to make. Like the hard bit was to really match that tracking. So then we are at the moment just going through and testing what that can do. Like if you play clip number 6, 5 testing, second 5.
All right.
Here we go. Yeah, but what's interesting, if I was a statistician, I would be the one that was the worst because I go for the biggest numbers. So rather than look for like a 1% change, I'm looking for a 20% change. So I radically bounce between mediums and technologies to
So 20% change in what?
Sorry?
20% change in what?
Say, for example, when I was doing that body tracking then, for me, it's all about the accuracy. So beforehand, I was doing it using volumetric capture, which is, using Microsoft Kinect to basically measure the entire 3D space of a room. And if something moves through it, what would happen? And it's just not quite tight enough. And also the file sizes are really huge. So rather than just try and kind of like working at that and trying to make it like 1% different, or, continuously enhance it, because volumetric is actually a relatively mature industry now, I dare say. But
on the way.
Yeah, but instead we looked at it from another approach, and we were like, okay, cool. Well, what's another way of doing it so that I can get what I want? Because I want to just smoothness of action. So then we went with, it seems overly complicated, but fortunately it's built into your phone. So I was like, oh, well, I could use the AI to find your joints, and then the robot can move. I guess that's what I mean in terms of because at the moment I'm trying to make you feel emotion with using virtual means. When I'm doing my rapid prototyping, I quickly reject something if it can't do it, because I'm after, it's such early days. I think that as time goes on and as people start exploring more.
So where could it go? I mean, I suppose, I've got a few ideas around what you could do with that kind of body mapping. But I mean, what are some thoughts around the potential of that?
Well, outside of putting Ross Dawson on your dining room table, no, I think, obviously, it's really hard because also we have to imagine that at the moment, all you've got is a phone or a tablet in your hand. And we have to be aware of the reality of you're holding that it's kind of heavy. Now, I know we also have to imagine that potentially you'll be wearing glasses or something. But I guess I'm still kind of looking in that field of you kind of look at the future in two ways. I do personally. I look at a future where actually everything is kind of can be augmented, and the assumption of what the delivery device to your brain is doesn't matter. That's the far future. And then the near future as well, you have to hold something. So how can I do something really quick, so you can have a quick interaction. Yeah, does that kind of answer that?
Well, it's partly, I mean, part of it in terms of obviously becoming more parts of our lives, but it's also, I suppose, the artistic applications, but also the applications in terms of, virtuality.
Yeah,
And
like
so, I mean, if we could have a virtual dance party where everyone is dancing, feels like they're dancing in the same room.
yeah, maybe. Well, what I'm surprised is that there doesn't seem to be any virtual protests. Like, for example, if you go to the Louvre, and if you shine your phone at the Mona Lisa using an AR app called Ep3, the Mona Lisa will fill up with water. And I did that last year because of climate change. And that's the one thing I think is a bit weird, that I would have expected a lot more, because you're doing things in virtual spaces, so therefore you can deface any brand or building, or even put a positive message on it, or re-educate people. But no, I'm not seeing that, which surprises me. But maybe it's because I live in the world no one else does. Remember, I am the only person left with a VR headset.
So what you've got a few other clips to play us. So what else have you got to share? What little works you've done?
Yeah, well, I think for me, I'm still not at virtual excellence though. Like, I'm kind of at virtual.
Well, it's a journey. It's a journey. I don't think we're trying to say that anyone's there.
Yeah. So I thought I would continue with some fun things. So if you roll number 7, like, this is a fun game that everyone can play at home even. There's an app called Mesai, done by this incredible Japanese creative technologist.
How do you spell it?
I think it's MEISAI, but I'll get back to you on that because I always spell it wrong. But basically it's body occlusion, and body occlusion is, like I said before, the phone basically finding, this one's different. Rather than find the joints, it's just finding the outlines of your body. It's what Ross is using with his fantastic virtual studio. I think this is something huge in terms of being able to share people things. And I think also, like, using a crowd or a body is a really interesting artistic device. Like, as an artist, perhaps you could do things like, if you interact with my painting, maybe your clothing might change to kind of like to fit with it. Whether that's virtual or real, that would be super cool if you could do it real. But thinking through that types of things, and that's only just like a 1-second thought from playing a little bit of technology there. So I definitely recommend that's a really good party trick. In terms of other things to do, like like if you roll number 8, looking at, like, the most recent, the second most recent kind of like emergency here in Australia is obviously COVID, and like, it's really confusing because everyone's talking about different spaces. Like, sometimes it's 1 meter. Like, yesterday I noticed that it was 1.5. I believe in the UK it's 2. But also, no one kind of like has much spatial knowledge. So what we also look to do is how can we use this technology to actually show space? And also, kind of, this is another example of similar to Mesai, but what it did is if people become within a certain distance, it can actually make them into warning signs.
Right.
But again, like, I guess I'm just kind of like too deep in the industry, because as far as I know, apart from Snapchat doing a okay filter, no one really used augmented reality for kind of like showing how people can be, like, helping people to spatially work out what's happening.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to do that. I mean, it goes to an earlier point saying not many people, well, more people using augmented reality than VR at the moment, but still not many. It still seems to be, in many cases, almost a toy in the way many people are using it, or still experimenting it. And obviously, there are some real applications, as we know.
Well, I've got one actually that luckily I just remembered about, and I gave it to you.
Yeah.
So if we roll number 9, I think, like, for me also, maybe the technology needs to be invisible. So here's an example of this: is as Ben Ali at the Art Gallery of New South Wales. And we worked with an awesome community and there was an Indigenous artist called Mr. Williams, and these are his banners, and he talked about like the fact of what Australians and the government has done to the land. And these were hanging here, and everyone would look at them and go, "Oh, that's fantastic, isn't it?" But they didn't really know what it says. So what we did with these ones is it does a translation, and it actually says, "Well, this is what these are saying," and it's not so complimentary to the history of Australia. But yet again, it is the history of Australia. We should know this. The reason I bring this up is not that. The reason I bring this up is more for technology to be invisible, so you don't really notice what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I think that I think that's like kind of like one of the key parts. So it could be that there's a lot happening, but we just don't see it. And I think that could be a measure of virtual excellence as well.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, where do you see your work going from here? I mean, just in the virtual related space. You've got you're working with galleries around the world. I suppose playing with this stuff. I mean, where should we be taking this? Where do we need to develop our excellence, as it were?
Oh, and kindness. And I think, to be honest, like the whole world would be good if everyone just went right. Like, how can we make people be kinder? How do we take away, or even machine learning?
So how can we?
Well, I don't know. I was thinking the other day that you could. Like if I could probably build some things that could work out. Well, the human, it's too difficult actually with the human psyche, because like the thing is that we don't want to do what's best for us and what's healthy. In my case, that's always the case. However, there are things like telling the truth, perhaps. That would be great. We have the technology to be able to potentially work out what is truth, but who do we trust in terms of who runs that technology? Like, I guess that's a different, like, kind of 1 hour talk. Going back to your original question, which is, where do I think this technology could go? Ideally, it's interesting for me, the virtual world and the physical world. And I wonder if there's any way to actually find some new forms of connection between them. Seems weird, but that's the type of thing artists do. We just sit there for maybe a couple of months and then go, oh, it turns out there isn't. Next picture.
I mean, I think it almost goes to the heart of the artistic endeavor, in the sense of we have the real world, and what the artist creates is, extensions of the mind around that, or on top of that, or through that. And so now we have far more tools through technology, and being able to take real world, add to it, twist it, distort it. And that's a lot of the sort of work which you're doing, I think.
Yeah, well, I guess it's because like my favorite word is cognitive dissonance, even though I don't think I really understand what it means. But if augmented reality, because there's that other thing that, like, the less you know, the more you'll argue. If we could use augmented reality to solve that, that would be pretty cool. Maybe you could have like when you're talking to someone about it, maybe you could have like a little augmented, like, this is actually how much he knows about this topic or not.
Yeah. Well, that's, as I said, relating truth to AR, but AR not just for information, but also for extension. And I think there's a lot of the work we are doing is has a lot of potential to
education, for example,
take things further.
Huge opportunities in education. Huge opportunity to re-educate children that their phone is not an entertainment device and it's a scientific tool. Like I'll let you know if I ever achieve that, but that's possibly what you could do. And then in commerce, obviously, there's augmented commerce. Like, that's already going nuts. I think it's like the propensity of buying something after looking at it in an augmented way is 2 to 3 times.
Yeah. So thanks so much for being on the show, Charles, getting up early and sharing some of your work and insights. So we'll probably check on again later at some point to see where you're getting with those endeavors.
Yeah, no problem. That's a pleasure. Have a
Thank
great
you.
day.
Have a fabulous day.
Pleasure.
So to round out, we just, as always, please be part of the community. Subscribe on YouTube. Go to the website. Go to the website and check out what things are going on there. You can use the hashtag whilst we're using live, more generally on Twitter, and we've also got our Facebook, where we're going to try to build some more extended conversations. So same time each week for the virtual show. Sorry, the Virtual Excellence Show. We interview with somebody interesting. We're trying to get more people involved along the way, and then we'll release some other things along the way. So please be part of the community. We're going to explore virtual excellence together. Thank you so much for being with us today.